One of the most interesting quirks in a power system is when the usage of power can be devastating for the user. It adds an extra layer of detail and intrigue to the story as things just get harder for the character. It's even better when the protagonist is made to experience this drawback because while they will always have plot armor, the drawback makes their abilities a bit more realistic, at least for their world. Of course, because they are protagonists, it's unusual that they straight up die early from having these powers, but of course we see that too with Eren Yeager. But then there are many instances where the powers acquired continue to put the user's life in danger time and time again until they learn how to counter the drawback. In today's video, we'll go over 9 such protagonists whose powers have been directly responsible for nearly killing them. Before we get started, if you enjoy the content, please consider subscribing to our channel. Hit the bell icon for notifications and stay tuned to our world of marvelous and popular fantasy and fiction. With that said, let's jump right into the video. Number 1. Eren Yeager. Attack on Titan. Starting this list off with the most obvious entry, Eren Yeager. He inherited the Attack Titan at the age of 10 from his father Grisha, and with it came the Curse of Ymir, leaving him with only 13 more years to live. This curse applies to anyone who inherits a Titan shifter, to be fair, and Eren is just one of many, but yes, his shortened lifespan plays a huge role in the actions he takes, which set many of the major events of the story into motion. All in all, Eren pays a huge price with his lifespan for the physical buff that the Titan shifter gives him. As the main events kick off around the time he's 15, he's left with only 8 years. By the time the time skip kicks in, he only has 4 more years to go, and hence his rushing with the rumbling, as he had to wrap things up and safeguard the future of Paradise Island and his friends before the curse would claim him. But, as fate would have it, he was killed by Mikasa before his tenure would come to an end, as that was part of Eren's well-laid-out plan. But let us talk about the curse and why it shortens a Titan shifter's lifespan. It all began 2,000 years before the events of the story, with Ymir acquiring the power of the founding Titan. However, she died exactly 13 years after turning into a Titan, as she took a spear that was meant for King Freecss in order to protect him. Due to her deteriorating state of mind caused by being the king's concubine, she was left with no will to regenerate and continue living. Anyways, with her powers being passed down following her death by making people consume her spinal fluid, the founding Titan was split into a total of 9 Titan shifters over the next few generations. Like Ymir, every shifter lived up to 13 years from the time they became a Titan shifter. One would get physically weaker as their term would come to a close, and generally, they would pass away as a result, leaving the Titan shifter to be passed down to any random subject of Ymir. To avoid that fate, the shifter was generally fed to another subject of Ymir by first training the latter to wield said Titan and then turning them into a pure Titan so that they would consume the restrained shifter. This is also how the Attack Titan was passed down to Eren, with Grisha consuming a fragile Kruger and Eren consuming Grisha. It has not been explicitly stated how the Titan power kills a wielder, but we know that with each transformation or regeneration, a Titan acquires the power they are manifesting as a result of Ymir making it from scratch in the paths. The entire experience of wielding a Titan is one that exhausts its wielders in unimaginable ways, so biologically, it could very well be sucking off the life force of the individual. In fact, had Ymir died from natural means, she might not have gotten stuck in the paths and moved on, but due to her twisted Stockholm Syndrome-style love for King Freecss, she got trapped, waiting to be freed. The curse that trapped her then trickled down to take away the lifespan of her descendants who would wield a power reminiscent of hers. When it comes to Eren, he knew the fate of the world across every reality due to his access to past and future memories as the Attack Titan as well as the Founding Titan. He knew that the only thing that would safeguard his land and his friends was a large-scale rumbling. With only 4 years left on the clock, he had to choose between running away with Mikasa or causing a global genocide. Technically, he did both, as he chose to run away with her in one reality and died as a result of the curse, but in the main reality of the show, he did cause the rumbling and died as a result of Mikasa severing his head. Either way, he was doomed. Because Eren's death resulted in Ymir being freed, the power of the Titans also ceased to exist. This resulted in the existing Titan shifters, such as Armin, Reiner, Annie, and more, to lose their Titan powers and beat the curse of Ymir. 2. Monkey D. Luffy. One Piece. Next up, we have the irrepressible Luffy. Time and time again, he has been made to parallel his predecessor and the former king of the pirates, Gol D. Roger. While Roger met his end as a result of being executed in Logetown, he really let it happen because he was gonna die anyways. A mysterious illness had overcome him, and we don't know how or why, and he would have passed away soon even if he hadn't been executed. There is a chance that Luffy might meet a similar fate, not with respect to the execution, but the lifespan, after all is said and done. And in his case, his powers derived from the gum-gum fruit or the human Nika fruit might have something to do with it, and we are exposed to this idea for the very first time in Enies lobby when Luffy uses Gear 2. Gear 2 operates by Luffy increasing his blood pressure by using his rubber calves like a spring to speed up his blood flow. This fires up his metabolism and more oxygen and nutrients are distributed throughout his body. The point of this process is to increase his speed and strength dramatically to the point that his body turns red and begins to emit steam. But this comes at a cost, as pointed out by his opponents in the arc, as it supposedly decreases his lifespan by overstraining his body. As the gears level up, so too does the strain on Luffy's body. While Gear 2 exhausts him until post-time skip, using Gear 3 would cause Luffy to turn into a kid for a while. He eventually gained proper control over these abilities after training with Rayleigh, but then we get Gear 4. That is his first gear where he pushes his rubber abilities to the limit alongside his Haki. In fact, when Rayleigh pointed out how Luffy needed something more effective than his Kong gun, Luffy showed off his King Kong gun, which Rayleigh called out for being an even bigger strain on his physical being. Exhaustion while in Gear 4 causes Luffy to revert to his base form, and he is unable to use Haki for 10 minutes, which is his biggest drawback while in a fight in the New World. The thing about every gear until Gear 5 is that it is Luffy forcing an awakening instead of naturally acquiring it, and as a result, it's way too physically taxing. While Gear 5 is a natural awakening of the mythical zone human Nika fruit, Luffy turns into a senile old man when he's out of juice. We don't know the significance of this particular transformation into an ultra-senior citizen yet, but it clearly reflects how much the form exhausts Luffy. He can recuperate after eating, however, and more training with Gear 5 should allow him to sustain the transformation for longer. However, a lot of the damage is already done. To add to that, Luffy sacrificed approximately 10 years of his life in Impel Down after Ivankov's treatment had to consume 10 years of his lifespan to heal him from Magellan's attack. With everything considered, it's clear that his powers definitely heavily tax his body, but we can only hope his increasing control over it reverses the effects and he beats this one Roger parallel allegation by outliving him. There is also the fact that acquiring Devil Fruit powers means that Luffy will not be able to swim and easily drown, leading him to his death. In fact, Luffy has often had to be saved by his friends and allies as opponents have used his disadvantage to their advantage, such as in Arlong Park where he was made to sink with cement stuck to his feet, and due to being weakened in water, he couldn't stretch himself out to keep his head on the surface to breathe. 3. Edward Elric, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Okay, this one's less about his powers taking from his life and more on the lines of Edward trading a few years to heal an injury using his powers. As an alchemist, Edward Elric must adhere to the law of equivalent exchange to make his powers work. This law states that to gain something, one must lose something of equal value, so this is kind of like a hyper-measured accuracy barter. Sometime around episode 41 in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, a fight between Edward and Kimberly near Briggs led to Edward exchanging some of his life energy to heal a wound from being impaled instantly, and he referred to the life energy lost as losing years off his lifespan. We never really got to know how much of his lifespan is lost as a result of this, but it is debated that the time lost isn't too much because had it been otherwise, it would have been mentioned, as we saw with Ivankov forcing Luffy to lose 10 years from his. There are fans who believe Edward lost decades from his life for the transmutation, but that's unlikely since his wound would have healed anyway over time and he just sped up the process with a little sacrifice. Had he not done so, he would have bled out and died anyways at the tender age of 15, so come to think of it, he didn't sacrifice much. By the end of the story, Edward gives up his knowledge of performing alchemy at the Gate of Truth to bring back Alphonse, which means that he never finds himself in a place where he performs any transmutation ever again, let alone one where he has to knock off a few years of his life. He supposedly goes on to live until 88, as seen from the mangaka Arakawa's pencil drawings, where she illustrates Edward across various ages. The last one had his tombstone reading that he had passed away at 88, so the life he sacrificed didn't make much of a dent in the life he lived. 4. Izuku Midoriya, My Hero Academia. A very obvious entry on the list, Midoriya, or Deku, was born quirkless in a world where almost everyone was born with a quirk, all while dreaming of being a #1 hero like All Might. As fate would have it, an encounter with All Might led to the hero passing down his power, one for all, to Midoriya, as the latter was made to consume a strand of All Might's hair. But this power was an explosive one, and Midoriya had to train his body regularly to be able to use even a fraction of this power. As a power that gets passed down from one generation to the next, Midoriya had a lot on his hands with that level of accumulated power, as he was the 9th wielder of the quirk. Through training with All Might, he gained enormous strength and speed, but the recoil from the power took an immense toll on his body, shattering his bones, and in some cases, repetitive injuries threatened to cause his arms to stop working altogether if he didn't restrain himself. He adapted by using only small percentages, but there were situations where he just had to go off. All in all, despite being the guy with the strongest quirk, Midoriya could not fight on par with his peers for the longest time, as his body couldn't wield the extent of the power he had acquired. In fact, using One for All at its optimum levels while not being able to wield it properly can not only damage Izuku's body, but send him to his death. Recurring injuries followed by Recovery Girl constantly using her quirk to heal him also threatened Midoriya with accelerated aging and a shortened lifespan. In fact, a past owner of One for All, Hikage, passed away from old age while being young due to the impact of the quirk on his body. However, things would never get that bad for Midoriya, as he was born quirkless, unlike Hikage. One for All not only passes down the enormous strength All Might is known for, but also the quirks of the previous wielders. Due to its impact on the body, a quirkless person is the appropriate choice for One for All, as they are less likely to be affected by the shortened lifespan drawback. All Might's incredibly trained and baseline powerful physique was what allowed him to wield the One for All for the longest to its potential and become the #1 hero. However, he himself was nerfed during a battle against All for One, where he was gravely injured. While he did manage to win, All for One managed to land a huge blow to puncture his stomach and affect his respiratory system. This resulted in All Might not being able to sustain his muscular superhero form beyond a particular time limit, and he'd get watered down to a skinny, sick-looking form. Due to his failing health and the time in which he could sustain his form getting shorter by the day, he had to pass his quirk down to the next best person, which became Midoriya. Until the end of Season 3, however, All Might retained remnants of his powers, and following another battle against All for One after Bakugo was kidnapped, All Might went all out to defeat the antagonist despite his condition, forcing his body beyond his limit. All for One was defeated once more, but All Might permanently lost the power to wield One for All, once again proving how physically taxing the power is on the user. For Midoriya, training with All Might's former trainer, Gran Torino, proved to be a game-changer. Under his tutelage, Izuku gained creator control over One for All and managed to create his signature full cowl, which operated by increasing his speed, strength, and maneuverability while minimizing the backlash dramatically. Up until then, he could, for the most part, use his power to an output of around 45% only. Followed by another training session, Endeavor, Izuku finally became powerful enough to withstand recoil from using his quirk to the fullest. It was also harder for Izuku to wield One for All compared to All Might because the quirk's power gets amplified from one generation to the next. In the end, Izuku lost One for All as he forcibly transferred it to Shigaraki Tomura during the war arc, and the stockpiled powers ultimately caused Tomura's body to succumb to it. The embers of the power remained with Izuku for a long time, similar to how All Might could use One for All for a short period of time after passing it down to Midoriya. However, the story ended with those embers finally extinguishing and One for All ceasing to exist. 5. Tanjiro Kamado, Demon Slayer. From the beginning of Demon Slayer, we see Tanjiro with a mark on his forehead. Initially pink, Tanjiro had seemingly acquired this mark as a kid to save his younger sibling from a boiling kettle that was about to fall atop him. Around episode 4, the pink patch turned into a crimson-red flaming mark when the hand demon smashed Tanjiro's head into a tree. The very specific design change made it very clear that it wasn't just a regular scar. This mark is the Demon Slayer mark, possessed not just by Tanjiro, but also by his father Tanjiro, the progenitor of the sun-breathing Yoriichi Sugikuni, the upper rank 1 Kokushibo, and eventually some of the other Hashiras such as the Stone Hashira Gyome, Love Hashira Mitsuri, Snake Hashira Obanai, Mist Hashira Muichiro, and the Wind Hashira Sanemi. But how is this connected to power and lifespan? For this, we have to go back to the era of the Warring States, or the Sengoku period within the story, back when Yoriichi Sugikuni was born with the Demon Slayer mark. He was ostracized by his family and kept in secluded quarters, ready to be sent away to live at a temple in a decade, as the mark was considered inauspicious. It was rumored to be something that takes the life of its inheritor by the time they turn 25. But it is this mark that made Yoriichi an exemplary swordsman and the strongest demon slayer in history. Before the onset of the Hashira training arc, the Mist Hashira explained how his body temperature exceeded 39 degrees Celsius while his heart rate surpassed the 200 BPM mark, after which he manifested his markings. The mark heightens the abilities of its wielder, making them more powerful and eventually giving them access to the transparent world. This is a space where a demon slayer can see through their opponent and perceive the inner workings of their bodies. Access to the transparent world was what allowed Tanjiro to manage to behead Akaza during the Infinity Castle arc. The difference between Tanjiro and the other Hashiras is that Tanjiro is perpetually in a state where his mark remains manifested, probably due to his affinity for sun breathing. That is, the original breathing technique created by Yoriichi. His mark is often shown growing in size during an intense battle, such as the one against Gyutaro in the Entertainment District. The push increases Tanjiro's strength, and while it generally reverts to its original size after the dust settles, Tanjiro comes out stronger than he was before. He went from almost dying against Rui, a lower moon, to managing to take out the upper-ranked Gyutaro with the Sound Hashira. With time, he managed to fight other stronger demons such as Hantengu, then Akaza, and finally Muzan. The mark also causes the sword of a demon slayer to turn a bright red color, mimicking the sun and making it more effective at killing demons. All in all, this mark is what makes people, and in this case Tanjiro, powerful. But, as we've already mentioned, the mark is considered to be a curse that takes from one's lifespan, which is why Yoriichi's brother, Michikatsu, now known as Kokushibo, was mortified after manifesting the mark. This led to him accepting Muzan's offer to become a demon, allowing him to beat his curse. Most characters in the story who manifested the mark did end up passing away, apart from Yoriichi, who died of old age due to natural causes. But we don't know if Tanjiro went on to live beyond 25. With Muzan dead, the reign of demons came to an end, so anything to do with the Demon Slayer mark could have gotten nullified in a miraculous scenario, but this is seemingly left open to interpretation. 6. Luna Heela, the hidden dungeon only I can enter. This is one of the more offbeat entries on this list, and it revolves around the elven heroine from the show, Luna. She's a compassionate cleric of the church who listens to her people's problems and, like her late mother, heals them from dangerous curses using a power known as the Lift Curse skill. The issue with this ability is that it heals the person in exchange for the lifespan of the one performing it. In this case, Luna heals her patient by taking from her own lifespan. This is an ability Luna had inherited from her mother, who initially had a long lifespan and as a result, used the Lift Curse free-handedly. One day, as she healed a sick child, she passed away. Naturally, Luna is afraid of meeting the same fate as her mother, but also can't stop using her ability due to her compassionate and kind nature and status as a cleric and saint. In fact, she is often shown fainting after using too much of her magic, but she does find an antidote when she meets Noir Stardia. Noir edits Luna's skill to not consume her life force and creates the Luna Savings LP Bank for her to help her with the fainting. 7. Gon Freecss, Hunter x Hunter. Gon is an exemplary user of Nen. As an enhancer, he has no particular ability that takes from his lifespan to make him stronger, but it's not until the climax of the Chimera Ant arc that Gon is nearly killed as a result of a temporary power-up acquired via a Nen contract. But let's go over some history. During the beginning of the arc, Gon had gotten quite close to Kite, a hunter who had been a student to Gon's father, Ging. In a way, Kite was the closest thing to a father figure that Gon ever had. However, despite whatever fight Kite put up, he could not defeat Neferpito. As Pito had enjoyed the fight against Kite, he decided to keep his body and reanimate it to use it as a puppet for training new ant soldier recruits. At the raid conducted by the hunters to take down the Chimera Ants and the Ant King, Gon specifically wanted to see Kite and fight Pito. When he finds out that not only is Kite dead, but he's being used like a toy, he gets furious, demanding Pito heal him. But of course, that doesn't work out. When the Royal Guard threatens to kill Gon, he unleashes his emotions and signs a contract with his Nen, asking for all the power he can ever have in exchange for whatever necessary, sacrificing a portion of his lifespan. This leads to Gon being aged up into an older version of himself where his strength is comparable to Meruem's. This also gives him a huge strength boost over Pito, who otherwise has always been much more powerful than Gon. Following this, Gon thrashes the living daylights out of Pito to the point that a simple rock punch sends Pito flying to the mountains. Despite losing his arm, he continues to use the arm to beat up and impale Pito's headless body and finishes him off with a Jajanken. But he goes on to pay a huge price for this power-up. It's possible that he gave up more than just his ears, judging by the subsequent condition of his body, as it's believed that he even gave up his future potential. Gon is left for near death after the fulfillment of the deal. He's comatose, his body visibly rotten and sickly thin and constantly bleeding, leaving him barely alive and needing to be put on life support. In fact, the doctor claims he's never seen a 12-year-old in such a gruesome condition. With no one able to bring him back or save him, a miracle is ultimately performed by Killua's younger sister, Aluka Zoldyck, who is possessed by a creature from the Dark Continent known as Nanika and can perform almost anything given the proper conditions are met. Because both Aluka and Nanika love Killua, she does it without asking for anything in return. An unbelievably huge energy wave is emitted, and finally, Gon is healed, but as a result of the contract, he has lost his proficiency at Nen. It's not like he can't use it again, but more so the fact that he's back to the Hunter exam Gon, who didn't know how to use Nen. 8. Naruto. Naruto's birth was made to strategically coincide with the attack of the nine-tailed demon fox Kurama on Leaf Village. With his parents, Minato and Kushina ultimately sacrificing themselves to subdue the fox and save the people of the village, the fox was sealed within Naruto by Minato by using a very powerful sealing jutsu. As a result, Naruto became a vessel for the strongest tailed beast and was labeled as a Jinchuriki, but he didn't know how to use these powers as he grew up, let alone control them. He would only end up being able to use the fox chakra during a hyper-emotional moment, during which he would go berserk and often operate unconsciously as Kurama would take over. The whole point of the seal was to prevent that for as long as possible, but Kurama would allow his chakra to seep through little by little and try to take control when Naruto was emotionally enraged or vulnerable, thus loosening the seal a bit. But this was a problem. If the seal was made to break, Kurama could come out of Naruto while Naruto himself would die, as it is a canon rule in the story that when the tailed beast of a Jinchuriki is extracted from their body, they die. Well, Naruto would have been powerful anyway, Jinchuriki or not. It is a fact that a significant amount of his power and chakra exists due to Kurama. His job was not to acquire it, but to learn how to control such an absurd amount of power. To make this possible, Jiraiya would loosen his seal bit by bit and train him. After Naruto goes berserk while fighting pain, his last seal is about to fall off when Minato's chakra, which remained within Naruto as a contingency, protects him. Had that not happened, Naruto would have died with his tailed beast leaving his body. Eventually, he not only gains control over his power, but befriends Kurama. But during the war, Madara extracts Kurama out of his body, throwing Naruto into a near-death situation. His life is only prolonged by Sakura manually pumping his heart, Gaara flying him to a safe space, and Naruto's Uzumaki heritage blessing him with a strong life force. He would have died anyways, just later, but with Minato having been reanimated with access to the yin half of Kurama, Naruto survived by being turned into a Jinchuriki once more. At present, Kurama has sacrificed himself after giving Naruto access to Baryon mode in order to defeat Ishiki. However, this didn't cause Naruto to pass away, as this mode dissolves Kurama's chakra instead of extinguishing it, and he doesn't get extracted out of the host body either. This results in the death of Kurama, and Kurama alone, but not Naruto. Extraction aside, every time Naruto went wildly berserk before having gained the necessary control, Kurama's raw chakra would burn through his body, eating at it. Had there been no one to subdue Naruto, he probably would have died while in that form from the overload of chakra, which would have disintegrated his body. For this reason, Kakashi often had Yamato accompanying Naruto in his missions, as his access to wood-style jutsu was effective at keeping Kurama suppressed. 9. Yuji Itadori, Jujutsu Kaisen. And finally, we end the list with Yuji, a boy who grew up living a normal life and was suddenly thrown into the world of Jujutsu because he became a vessel for the strongest and the most cruel curse and sorcerer in history, Sukuna. It was unusual for a person to be able to retain their own individuality and suppress the king of curses, but Yuji did it anyways, which made him a target for the Jujutsu world. But first, let's get down to why he could do that. Yuji's birth was not normal, and this precisely boils down to his mother, Kaori Itadori. Kaori was in actuality Kenjaku within her body. His goal was to merge humanity with Tengen to force an evolution among humans and cursed energy where they could exist seamlessly. Meanwhile, curses wished to revive Sukuna, who was too powerful to be killed, and as such, had to have his fingers sealed and scattered. Kenjaku could not have Sukuna run rampant, as that would foil his plans, so he would need to create a cage for him. During the Meiji period, he posed inside the body of Noritoshi Kamo from the Kamo clan and got his wife's embryo aborted 9 times to create the Cursed Womb death paintings. Eventually, he changed his host body to Kaori Itadori, a sorcerer. Yuji was conceived naturally and birthed normally, albeit by Kenjaku. Allegedly, his tinkering and DNA infusion into Yuji marked him with the strength of a vessel. Kenjaku did say later that he had experimented with the minds and bodies of people, giving some the strength of vessels and others cursed techniques. As such, we can see how Yuji was essentially created to be able to operate as a vessel for a very powerful sorcerer, in this case Sukuna, especially because Kenjaku had sealed one of Sukuna's fingers within Yuji upon his birth. After Yuji does become the vessel, he operates like a cage for the sorcerer, allowing him to come and go as per his own will, at least for the most part. Having Sukuna within him also gave him a huge boost to his cursed energy and strength alongside other abilities, such as being resistant to poison and toxins. But this also made the Jujutsu higher-ups want to kill Yuji. To delay his execution, Gojo convinced them that Yuji could be made to consume all of Sukuna's fingers and then killed to exterminate the threat once and for all. And he didn't want to kill Yuji, but this is the story he fed to the higher-ups to satisfy them, thus keeping Yuji safe temporarily. However, after Gojo was sealed, the higher-ups sent Yuta to kill Yuji. Fortunately, Yuta did not wish to do so and just pretended to follow through with the plan. During episode 5, Sukuna did end up killing Yuji as he took control over his body and ripped out Yuji's heart after a battle against Megumi. Yuji was effectively dead, but Sukuna still remained within him. Ultimately, Yuji, within Sukuna's domain, was able to negotiate a return to life with Sukuna and was made to forget the details of the binding vow where Yuji would have to give him something in return for his life. This came to fruition in the Culling Games arc, where Sukuna uttering the word enchain led to control immediately going from Yuji to Sukuna for an entire minute as per the details of the vow. He did so as Megumi's will was broken down as he found out about his sister being a vessel for an ancient sorcerer called Yorozu. With that, Sukuna took control, put his cursed energy into a finger, and force-fed it to Megumi to swap vessels as he needed access to Mahoraga to bypass Gojo's infinity and kill him. Plus, unlike Yuji, Megumi would not be able to cage Sukuna, but he was strong enough to host him. But this meant that he stopped being Yuji's parasitic sorcerer and went on to become an external problem for the protagonist instead of an internal one. All in all, the power acquired by Yuji as the host isn't one where the power takes from his life to operate, but a power that his possession of puts him in serious danger and on the radar of many powerful sorcerers. Marvelous verdict! The addition of these detrimental factors within a power system of a story, as well as it being used as a liability for the protagonist, adds to the world building and the emotional component. Anime, unlike Western animation, tends to witness their protagonists start from the bottom and go up, instead of being like a Superman type of character with nearly consistent scaling. As a result, the narrative layer of the protagonist struggling with the drawbacks of their powers in their lives helps to make the story richer and more intense. And with that, today's video comes to an end. Did you enjoy it? If so, then don't forget to like and comment down below, and until next time, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.